Too many people live their lives believing that their past is a permanent label. They carry the weight of old mistakes, past failures, and painful experiences as if those moments have the final say on who they are. But just because something happened to you or even through you doesn't mean it has to become your identity. Think about this. If you picked up an old book and read just one chapter, would you assume that's how the whole story ends? Of course not. But that's exactly what happens when people define themselves by one bad season, one failure, one mistake. They take a single chapter and turn it into the entire narrative of their life. Maybe you grew up in a household where you were told you'd never amount to anything. Maybe you made some bad choices that you regret. Maybe someone walked out on you and now you feel unworthy of love. But none of those things get to write your future. Just because you had a rough start doesn't mean you have to live a defeated life. Look at the people God has used throughout history. Moses was a murderer, but he became a leader. Rahab was labeled as immoral, but she became a key part of God's plan. Paul persecuted Christians, yet he went on to write most of the New Testament. If any of them had let their past define them, they would have never stepped into their destiny. The problem is that too often people listen to the wrong voices. They let the enemy remind them of every failure. They replay every mistake in their minds. They believe the lies that say, you're not good enough. You'll never be free from your past. This is just who you are. But those voices are not from God. When God looks at you, He doesn't see your failures. He sees your potential. He doesn't define you by what you did, but by what He created you to be. The moment you accept that truth, everything changes. Think about a caterpillar. It may crawl in the dirt, move slowly, and look nothing like a butterfly, but inside it has the DNA of something greater. The past version of the caterpillar doesn't determine what it will become. When the time is right, it transforms into what it was always meant to be. No matter what's behind you, there is still something greater inside of you. The key is to stop seeing yourself through the lens of yesterday and start seeing yourself the way God sees you. Regret is a heavy burden that so many people carry, weighing them down and keeping them from stepping into the life they were meant to live. It whispers, if only I had made a different choice. If only I had said something else. If only I could go back and change things. But living in regret doesn't change the past. It only robs you of your future. Everyone has moments they wish they could redo. A conversation that ended the wrong way, an opportunity they walked past, a decision that led to pain. But the truth is, no amount of replaying the past will ever rewrite it. What's done is done. The only thing regret does is keep you stuck in a chapter that was meant to be turned. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with rocks everywhere you go. At first, you might not notice the weight, but over time, it slows you down. It drains your energy. It makes the journey harder than it was ever meant to be. That's what regret does. It holds on to every mistake, every misstep, every wrong decision, and it makes you feel like you'll never be free from it. But here's the thing, regret doesn't come from God. He never intended for you to live burdened by yesterday's choices. He offers grace, forgiveness, and new beginnings. When you hold on to regret, you're essentially saying that your mistakes are bigger than God's ability to redeem them. But there is nothing in your past that He cannot use for good. Some of the greatest people in history had moments they deeply regretted, yet those moments didn't stop them from fulfilling their purpose. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. David made decisions that nearly destroyed his life. Paul had a past filled with persecution and violence, If any of them had allowed regret to keep them stuck, they never would have stepped into their calling. Regret is deceptive because it convinces you that you're the only one who has ever messed up this badly. It tells you that you've gone too far, that your mistakes are too great, but that's a lie. No failure is final. No mistake is beyond redemption. No past is powerful enough to cancel God's plan for your future. The moment you stop looking back, you'll realize that the road ahead is still full of possibilities. The only thing regret can do is steal the time you still have. The longer you dwell on what you cannot change, the more you miss what's still in front of you. Failure is something everyone experiences, yet too often people let it define them. They believe that because they made a mistake, they are a mistake. That because they messed up, they can never be fully restored. But the truth is, no failure is beyond God's grace. His mercy doesn't run out when you fall short. His love doesn't waver when you make a wrong turn. In fact, His grace is so much greater than any failure you could ever experience. Think about a child learning to walk. They take a few steps, stumble and fall. But what does a loving parent do? They don't get angry. They don't say, well, I guess you'll never walk. That was your chance. No, they pick the child up, encourage them, and help them try again. That's exactly how God responds to His children. He doesn't give up on you when you fall. He picks you up, dusts you off, and says, keep going. I'm not finished with you yet. Many people believe that because they failed, they've disqualified themselves from God's purpose. But look at the Bible. God has always used imperfect people to fulfill His perfect plan. Moses had a temper and murdered a man. David fell into sin and made terrible choices. Jonah ran from his calling. Peter denied Jesus 3 times in his darkest hour. Yet in every one of those situations, God's grace was bigger than their failures. He didn't throw them away. He didn't say, you've gone too far. Instead, He redeemed their mistakes and used them in ways they never could have imagined. One of the greatest tricks of the enemy is to convince you that your failure is final. He'll whisper, look what you've done. You'll never recover from this. God won't forgive you this time. But that's a lie. There is no failure that God cannot redeem, no mistake that His mercy cannot cover. The very thing the enemy tries to use to shame you is often the exact thing God will use to launch you into your. God's grace is not based on your performance. It's based on His character. He doesn't love you because you're perfect. He loves you because He created you. His grace doesn't run out because you failed one too many times. The Bible says His mercies are new every morning. That means today is a fresh start. Yesterday's failures don't define you. The mistakes of your past don't have the power to cancel God's plans for your life. The only thing failure can do is remind you how much you need God's grace. And the good news is that grace is always more than enough. Guilt is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry. It sneaks into the heart, whispering reminders of past mistakes, failures, and wrong choices. It tells you that because of what you did, you'll never be truly free. That somehow you have to keep paying the price for your past. But that weight was never meant for you to carry. Many people go through life with an invisible weight pressing down on them. They smile on the outside, but inside they are exhausted from carrying years of guilt and shame. They replay their mistakes over and over, thinking, if only I had done things differently, if only I could go back and fix it. But no amount of regret can change the past. No amount of self-punishment can undo what's already been done. Guilt doesn't just steal your peace, it steals your joy, your confidence, and your ability to move forward. It makes you feel like you're unworthy of happiness, like you don't deserve good things because of what's behind you. But that is not how God sees you. He never intended for you to live under the crushing weight of guilt. The Bible says that when we confess our sins, God is faithful to forgive us. That means the moment you ask for forgiveness, He washes you clean. He doesn't hold your past over your head. He doesn't keep a record of your wrongs. If God has already forgiven you, why are you still carrying what He has let go of? Some people believe that guilt is their way of making things right, that if they hold on to it long enough, they are somehow atoning for their past. But guilt doesn't redeem you. Grace does. Jesus already paid the price. The punishment you think you deserve has already been taken care of. When He said, "It is finished," that included your guilt. Think of a prisoner who has been set free but chooses to stay in the cell because they don't believe they deserve to walk out. That's exactly what guilt does. It keeps you locked in a prison that God has already opened. The only thing holding you back is the belief that you have to carry something that was never yours to bear. Letting go of guilt isn't about ignoring your past. It's about trusting that God's grace is greater than your mistakes. It's about believing that His love covers even the worst moments of your life. It's about accepting the truth that you are not what you've done. You are who God says you are. It's easy to believe that your greatest moments are behind you, especially if you've been through disappointments, setbacks, or unexpected losses. Maybe you had dreams that didn't come to pass, relationships that didn't work out, or opportunities that slipped through your fingers. The temptation is to settle where you are, to think, this is as good as it gets. But that's not the truth. No matter what has happened in your past, God still has more in store for you. Too many people live with the mindset that their best days were yesterday. They talk about how good things used to be, how life was exciting, how they once had big dreams. But if you're still breathing, that means God is not finished with you. He didn't create you to peak in the past. He designed you to keep growing, to keep reaching, to keep stepping into new blessings and greater opportunities. Think about a tree. It doesn't stop growing just because it has already produced fruit. It doesn't say, well, I had a good season, time to give up. No. As long as it's alive, it keeps stretching its branches, keeps reaching for more sunlight, keeps producing new fruit. It's how your life is meant to be. You are not done. There are new doors waiting to open, new opportunities on the horizon, and new blessings that you haven't even imagined yet. One of the biggest tricks of the enemy is to convince you that your best days are over. He'll remind you of what didn't work out, of the years you think you wasted, of the times you tried and failed. But he wouldn't be working so hard to discourage you if there wasn't something incredible ahead. The fact that he's trying to get you to settle is proof that God has something greater coming your way. The Bible says that God takes us from glory to glory, from strength to strength. That means where you are right now is not the end of your story. Maybe you've seen success before, maybe you've had good seasons, but don't let that make you think that's all there is. What God has planned for your future will make everything you've seen so far look small in comparison. Sometimes the reason people think their best days are behind them is because they've stopped expecting good things. They've allowed disappointments to shape their outlook, so they no longer dream big, pray bold prayers, or step out in faith. But faith is believing that what's ahead is greater than what's behind. It's trusting that just because you haven't seen the best yet doesn't mean it's not coming. From the moment we are born, labels start getting placed on us. Some of them are positive, but many are limiting, hurtful, and false. Maybe someone called you not good enough, too slow, a failure, or unworthy. Maybe you grew up hearing that you'd never amount to anything, that you weren't smart enough, talented enough, or capable enough. Over time, those labels start to stick. They shape how you see yourself, how you think, and even what you believe you can accomplish. But just because someone called you something doesn't mean that's who you are. People will always have opinions, and they will try to define you based on your past, your mistakes, or their own limited perspective. But their words do not have the final say. Only God has the authority to define who you are, and He calls you chosen, loved, redeemed, and victorious. One of the biggest dangers of labels is that they can keep you trapped in a life that is smaller than what you were created for. If you believe the lie that you're not smart enough, you won't pursue the dreams God put in your heart. If you believe you're unworthy of love, you'll settle for relationships that don't honor you. If you think you're a failure, you'll stop trying before you even get started. The wrong labels don't just affect how you feel, they shape your future. Think about an old, valuable painting that has been mislabeled as worthless. It might sit in an attic collecting dust because no one realizes its true worth. But if someone peels off that false label and restores its original identity, suddenly its value is recognized. The same is true for you. If you've been walking around with false labels, labels of shame, insecurity, or failure, it's time to rip them off and see yourself the way God sees you. One of the most powerful examples in the Bible is Gideon. When the angel of the Lord appeared to him, he was hiding afraid and saw himself as the weakest in his family. But God called him a mighty warrior. He didn't look like a warrior, he didn't feel like a warrior, and he certainly didn't think like one. But that didn't change what God had spoken over him. The moment Gideon let go of the wrong label and stepped into his true identity, everything changed. The world may try to label you based on your past, but God labels you based on your purpose. People may call you broken, but God calls you restored. They may say you're not enough, but God says you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The labels that have held you back don't have to stay on you. The only thing that matters is what God says about you. We've all had moments we wish we could erase, choices we regret, relationships that ended badly, seasons where we felt lost, stuck, or broken. And if we're not careful, those moments can become a permanent address in our minds. We replay the past like an old movie, wondering what we could have done differently, wishing we could rewrite the script. But here's the truth. Your past is a lesson, not a life sentence. You were meant to learn from it, not live in it. So many people stay stuck in yesterday because they keep revisiting what they should have let go of. They hold on to shame, guilt, and disappointment as if carrying it somehow changes what happened. But no amount of overthinking, regretting, or wishing can rewrite the past. The only thing you can do is take the lesson and move forward. Think about driving a car. There's a reason the windshield is big and the rearview mirror is small. You glance back to stay aware, but if you keep staring in the rearview, you'll miss where you're going. That's exactly how life works. If you're always looking at what's behind you, you won't see the new opportunities, the fresh starts, the blessings that are ahead. God never intended for you to be chained to the past. He allows experiences, both good and bad, to shape you, teach you, and grow you. But He never meant for those experiences to define you. Every mistake, every detour, every closed door had a purpose. Maybe it taught you resilience. Maybe it prepared you for something greater. Maybe it revealed who was truly for you. If you keep your heart open, you'll start to see that even the hard seasons carried hidden wisdom. One of the greatest examples of this is Joseph in the Bible. He was betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for something he didn't do. If anyone had a reason to live in the past, it was him. He could have spent his life bitter, replaying the betrayal, letting anger and regret consume him, but instead he chose to learn from it. He let God use the experience to prepare him for the position of leadership he would eventually step into. What was meant to destroy him actually positioned him for greater things. The past only has power over you if you let it. You don't have to stay in regret, bitterness, or disappointment. You don't have to keep reliving the pain, wondering what could have been different. Instead of carrying the weight of the past, carry the wisdom from it. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, focus on what you gained. The past was a chapter, not the whole book. Your story is still being written, and the best chapters are the ones you haven't even lived yet. The people you surround yourself with have a powerful influence on your mindset, your attitude, and your future. You can have all the talent, potential, and dreams in the world, but if you're constantly around negative, small-minded, or complacent people, it will be almost impossible to rise higher. That's because who you walk with determines where you'll end up. If you spend time with people who are always complaining, always doubting, always settling, that mindset will start to rub off on you. Before you know it, you'll start thinking the same way, lowering your expectations and shrinking your dreams to match the level of those around you. But when you surround yourself with people who are growth-minded, people who believe for more, who are always learning, who challenge you to become better, you'll find yourself stretching beyond what you ever thought possible. Look at successful people in any area of life, business, leadership, faith, health. One of the things they all have in common is that they are intentional about the company they keep. They don't waste time with people who pull them down. They don't allow themselves to be influenced by those who have no vision for their own lives. Instead, they seek out those who inspire them, who challenge them, who push them forward. Think of it like an elevator. The people in your life are either taking you up or bringing you down. There's no such thing as neutral relationships. You can't spend time with people who are full of doubt, negativity, and fear and expect to live with faith, confidence, and boldness. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." That means the more you surround yourself with people who are growing, who are learning, who are pushing forward, the more you'll grow too. But if you spend time with those who make excuses, who don't believe for better, who settle for less, that same mindset will start to shape you. Sometimes growth means outgrowing certain relationships. It doesn't mean you stop loving people, but it does mean you are careful about who has the most influence in your life. If someone constantly drains you, discourages you, or speaks against the dreams God put in your heart, you have to be willing to create distance. You weren't created to live in mediocrity. You were made for greatness. And that means being intentional about the voices you allow in your life. Growth-minded people inspire you to think bigger. They encourage you to take risks, to believe for more, to step outside your comfort zone. They don't let you settle in fear or self-doubt. They remind you of who you are and who you are becoming. The right people will see the greatness in you even when you don't see it in yourself. There comes a time when you have to stop seeing yourself through the lens of who you used to be and start seeing yourself as the person you were created to be. Too many people live with an outdated identity, holding on to labels from the past, carrying mistakes that no longer belong to them, and defining themselves by what they've been through rather than by where they're going. But when God calls you into something new, you can't step into it while still clinging to the old. Your past does not have the authority to dictate your future. What happened to you, what was spoken over you, what you once believed about yourself, none of that has the power to limit what God has planned for you unless you allow it. The only thing standing between you and the new identity God has for you is the willingness to let go of the old one. Think about a caterpillar. It spends its early life crawling on the ground, but at the right time it goes through a transformation and emerges as a butterfly. Imagine if that butterfly still thought like a caterpillar. if it refused to spread its wings, if it kept crawling on the ground because that's all it had ever known, it would never experience the freedom it was designed for. The same is true for you. If you keep seeing yourself as the person you used to be, you'll never rise into the person you were meant to be. One of the greatest examples in the Bible is Saul, who later became Paul. He was known for persecuting Christians, making it his mission to stop the very thing he would later become a part of. But when he encountered God, everything changed. He wasn't just forgiven, he was transformed. His name changed, his mission changed, his identity changed. If Paul had held on to his past, if he had allowed guilt and shame to define him, he would have never stepped into his destiny. But he embraced the new identity God gave him and went on to change the world. Many people struggle to embrace their new identity because they feel unworthy. They think, I've made too many mistakes. I don't deserve a fresh start. But stepping into your new identity isn't about what you deserve. It's about what God has already done for you. He has already called you chosen, redeemed, and victorious. He has already erased your past and given you a new name. The question is, will you believe it? When you step into your new identity, you stop living as a victim of your past and start walking in the victory of your future. You stop settling for less than what God has for you. You start making decisions based on where you're going, not where you've been. You stop carrying guilt and shame that no longer belong to you. Everything about you begins to align with the truth of who you were created to be. Life has a way of throwing obstacles in your path. Disappointments, failures, losses, and unexpected detours. It's easy to get stuck, to let the past define you, to dwell on what didn't work out, or to allow fear to keep you from taking the next step. But no matter what has happened, no matter how long you've been in the same place, you have to make the decision to keep moving forward. You were not created to stay stagnant. You were not designed to live in regret or to camp out in the pain of yesterday. God is a forward-moving God, and He is always calling you higher, pushing you toward new opportunities and leading you into a better future. But you'll never step into what He has for you if you keep looking back, reliving the past, and holding on to what you were supposed to release. Think about the story of the Israelites. They had been freed from slavery in Egypt. But when things got difficult in the wilderness, they started longing for the past. They wanted to go back to what was familiar, even though it wasn't good for them. That's what happens when you focus too much on where you've been instead of where you're going. Fear of the unknown can make the past seem more appealing than it really was. But God didn't bring them out of Egypt to leave them wondering. He had a promised land waiting for them. The only thing standing between them and their future was their willingness to trust Him and keep moving forward. So many people give up right before they reach their breakthrough. They get tired of waiting, tired of trying, tired of pushing through obstacles. They settle because they don't see immediate results. But what if the very thing you've been believing for is just ahead? What if the dream you've been praying for, the opportunity you've been hoping for, the change you've been waiting for is on the other side of one more step forward? You'll never know unless you refuse to quit. Paul said in Philippians 3:13, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal. He understood that you can't move forward while still holding on to the past. That means letting go of past failures, past hurts, past disappointments, and even past successes. It means refusing to let yesterday's mistakes define today's decisions. It means choosing faith over fear, progress over comfort, and purpose over stagnation. Every step forward, no matter how small, brings you closer to the life you were meant to live. Maybe you don't feel like you're making progress. Maybe it seems like nothing is changing. But movement isn't always visible. Sometimes growth is happening beneath the surface, preparing you for what's next. Keep trusting, keep believing, keep pressing on. The only way you lose is if you stop moving.